Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today our commander is Jin Sakai, Ghost of Tsushima. Thanks to Noah T454 for requesting this commander. I honestly didn't know much about this card. I don't follow Secret Layers that closely, and since I'm not much of a console gamer, I only ever heard of the series that he comes from. But the research I've done on this character has been eye-opening, and I'm excited to share what I've put together for Jin. First, however, I want to mention that this card is currently selling for more than $70 USD on the secondary market, which is not just a lot of money, it's a huge chunk of the cost of this deck. So if you don't already own a copy of Jin Sakai, I want to suggest proxying it, so that you can try out the deck before you invest that much money in a single piece of cardboard, if ever you do. But if you already own a copy, or if you have a working printer, it's a powerful commander that can be a lot of fun. Before we get into the deck tech though, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's cool and why I put it in charge of the other 99 cards. So whatever it asks of me, I put 30 cards toward that. That's our game plan. It's what we try to do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go toward these three categories of support for that game plan: card advantage, acceleration, and interaction. I usually run one or two sweepers just to clear the board in case it's needed. Sometimes I'll run more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, but I almost always keep to my floor of 38 lands so I can make sure I can always hit my land drops and I can cast my spells. So let's talk about our commander. Jin Sakai, Ghost of Tsushima, is a 2/4 legendary human samurai for 1 and Esper mana, a white, a blue, and a black. It says whenever Jin Sakai deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card, so pretty good. And whenever a creature we control attacks a player, if no other creatures are attacking that player, choose either Standoff, the creature gains double strike until end of turn, or Ghost, the creature can't be blocked this turn. So that means, as opposed to a lot of the other samurai type effects we've seen for things like the samurai in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty that care about us just attacking with a single creature, a la the Exalted mechanic, Jin will actually trigger on multiple creatures attacking at the same time, as long as no more than one of each of those creatures is attacking each of our opponents. But if we have 3 opponents, we can attack with 3 creatures, just one for each opponent, and then a creature we control is attacking a player, and none of our other creatures are attacking that player. So Jin will trigger for each of those creatures, including himself. So as I understand it, Jin Sakai spent the years of his upbringing training as a samurai, then serving under his uncle Lord Shimura, who ruled over the island of Tsushima and became a paternal figure after Jin lost his mother and father. When the Mongols invaded Tsushima, Jin was the only samurai, or one of the only samurai, to survive that battle, albeit with terrible wounds. He was nursed back to health by a thief named Yuna, who became his close friend and ally. Yuna is the one who eventually tells the story that Jin is not simply a human warrior, but a vengeful ghost, a story that spreads and gives Jin his new identity. I know I'm skipping a lot, but the crux of Jin's character is his struggle with the idea of honor. His father and uncle raised him as an honorable man, a samurai who lived by and for his code, but the invading Mongols forced him to reevaluate it in the face of more pragmatic methods of fighting. He's reluctant to behave dishonorably, but time and again he has to choose between honor and efficacy, and his drive to defeat his enemies and protect his people pushes him in both directions. To quote Khoten Khan, the Mongol leader, samurai pride themselves on their honor code, but it also makes them rigid, predictable, easy to break. The ghost has no limits. This makes him dangerous. This dual nature of Jin as his uncle's nephew and Jin as the ghost is the central source of tension in his story, and it's up to the player to decide which route Jin ultimately chooses. It's also what captured my interest while researching this character, the idea of constantly having to choose between the actions of an honorable samurai or those of a flexible ghost sounds like a fun way of instilling a feeling of ownership in the player. So why can't we build a commander deck on that same idea? The deck I've assembled is full of cards that offer the player choices. Many of them are modal cards, giving us 2 or more options to pick from that shape the story of the game. Do we strengthen our commander, who is ultimately our win con in the form of commander damage? Or do we undercut our opponents so that Jin can slip past their defenses and strike at their hearts? Some of our cards offer us both choices only if we've taken a particular route already, while others give us more options when Jin is on the battlefield. We have cards that let us loot, since card selection always offers us an important choice, as well as planeswalkers that let us cultivate their loyalties while asking for their help each turn. We even have cards that make our decisions political, either helping everyone at the table or asking everyone to help us, even if it's helping us to hurt someone else. And at the center of it is Gene himself, stoically waiting for us to make our choices each turn. Which opponent or opponents will we send him after? Will he ghost in unblockably, or will he stand his ground and double strike his way through their defenders? He poses the question over and over. It's up to us to decide who we are in the process. There's a moment in the game when Gene speaks to Sensei Ishikawa, an older samurai and a skillful archer that trains Gene in the way of the bow. Gene has high expectations, a result of his strict thinking, but the sensei has the advantage of years, his experience lending him perspective. He says to Gene, "We all carry weapons. We all choose between life and death." Gene responds harshly, "And you're too comfortable with that power." To which the sensei replies, "And if I weren't, I would be dead, and so would you, Ghost." Gene struggles with the meaning of this, the way this perspective conflicts with the code he's always lived by. "Not everyone can be a samurai," he insists. The sensei smiles a little. "But we're all killers," he answers. You'll enjoy this deck if you want to decide for yourself what kind. So, as usual, the Moxfield list we're going to be going through today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of that list, you will see a section called Considering. It's full of cards that I considered putting in this deck and ultimately decided to go in a different direction from. But if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you'd like to go in a different focus than I did, that's a good place to get started if you want to build your own Gene Sakai Ghost of Tsushima deck. So we're going to start with the big section that I think is the most fun thematically, which I've just called Choices. These are all those cards I mentioned that give us ways to make decisions. We're going to start with a board wipe. Final Showdown is an instant with Spree. It costs one white mana, but it also requires us to choose an additional cost. We can choose any or all of these. We can either spend a white and a colorless, and all creatures in play lose all abilities until end of turn. We can spend a white and a colorless and choose a creature we control to gain indestructible until end of turn, or we can spend 3 white and 3 colorless and destroy all creatures. Or we can combine all these. If we really want to, we can spend 5 and triple white to make all creatures lose all abilities, one of our creatures gain indestructible, and then destroy all creatures, which means we save probably Gene Sakai, and then everything else goes away. It's an expensive board wipe, but sometimes choices are hard. And we can use it for fun things like, we attack someone's commander and they're not worried about it because they have Death Touch and Indestructible. We pay a white and 1, and all creatures lose all abilities until end of turn, so maybe it just dies. Next is Lost Jite. For a single generic mana, we get a legendary equipment that equips for 1 that says whenever an equipped creature deals combat damage, put a charge counter on Lost Jite. Remove a charge counter from the Jite to choose to either untap a land, make a creature unable to block this turn, or put a 1/1 counter on the equipped creature. So oftentimes in this deck, we want to pump up Gene Sakai. We want him to be bigger because we're trying to win with commander damage, and he has the ability to make himself unblockable, or if we can make him unable to be blocked, we want to be able to choose the double strike. So the counter is really powerful for us. However, we're going to be doing combat damage with him all the time, so getting counters on the Jite is really powerful. So we can use that to untap our lands, which we can use for other effects, or just to get mana. Or if we have an opponent who only has 1 blocker, we can take off a counter and make it so Gene is essentially unblockable because the only blocker that opponent has can't block this turn. So yeah, either way, the Jite is not as powerful as the original Umezawa's Jite, but it's very useful for us. Next is Pip-Boy 3000 from the Fallout decks. For a single generic mana, we get an equipment that equips for 2, and it says whenever the equipped creature attacks, choose 1. We either sort our inventory, which means we draw and then discard. We pick a perk, which means we put a counter on the equipped creature, or we check our map, which is we untap 2 target lands. So similarly to untapping a land with the Jite, the Pip-Boy lets us get a little extra mana in our turn that we can spend post-combat, but it is interesting because the Pip-Boy triggers on attack, and the Jite triggers to put counters on itself whenever it does combat damage. If our commander is equipped with the Jite, that means we could possibly get 2 counters on the Jite, since our commander could have double strike. So each of those instances of combat damage will put a counter on the Jite, whereas the Pip-Boy only triggers at the start of combat after we've declared Jin as an attacker. So yeah, with the Pip-Boy, again, we're likely to put counters on it, but untapping those lands is not bad, and sorting through our cards just by looting, also pretty good for us. Next, we have another Spree card in Requisition Raid. This one's a little simpler than before. For a white, we have a sorcery that says Spree, choose one or more additional costs. We can either spend a white and destroy an artifact, spend a generic mana, spend a different generic mana and destroy an enchantment, or spend a third and put a 1/1 counter on each creature target player controls. So it does say target player, so we are able to use this politically. We can say, look, I can pump up your creatures either to have you better defend an attack by a different opponent or better attack a different opponent. What will you give me for it? Will you ignore me for the next turn? Will you let me hit you with my commander? That sort of thing. But a lot of the times, this is really just 2 mana to put a single counter on our commander, because sometimes we don't have more creatures than that. However, we can spend white and 3 to destroy an artifact, destroy an enchantment, and put a counter on each creature target player controls. So Spree is very flexible for us, and it's worth looking at the choices that it offers us. Next is Spectacular Tactics from the Spider-Man set. 1 and a white for an instant that says either put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control and it gains hexproof until end of turn, or destroy a target creature with power 4 or greater. This is a great card because hexproof and a counter can really protect our commander when needed, and if we want to just kill something, we can also do that. And killing things often turns into evasion, because if Jin Sakai only has 1 blocker, we just kill that blocker, assuming it's big enough, and now we can choose his double strike mode rather than his unblockable mode when he attacks that defender. Next is Tyrant Scorn from War of the Spark. For a blue and a black, we get an instant that lets us either destroy target creature with mana value 3 or less, or return target creature to its owner's hand. So this is not every creature, but there's a lot of relatively inexpensive commanders out there, and a lot of very powerful cards that are just not 4 mana or more. So being able to blow something up that is a value piece, or something that's really annoying us, or just someone's commander to slow the game plan down, Tyrant Scorn can be powerful for that. And everything else, we can just bounce. We can also, however, bounce our own things. Jin Sakai costs 4 mana, so it's pretty annoying to have him removed and have to play him again for 6 mana and hope we untap with him so we can get our game plan back again. It's still 6 mana if we're spending 2 on Tyrant Scorn to bounce him and then play him again for our hand for 4 mana, but that's over 2 turns. So ultimately much better for us if we wanted to use it to protect our commander, or just, we could use it as a removal spell as well. Next is Brotherhood Outcast, also from Fallout. 2 and a white for a 3/2 human soldier that says, when it enters, choose either return target aura or enchantment with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, or put a shield counter on target creature. So we have 7 equipment and 6 auras. So not all of them may be mana value 3 or less, but that's 13 cards that we could possibly hit with a Brotherhood Outcast. And putting a shield counter on something is pretty great. Shield counters are a counter that means it sort of has a bubble around the creature with the counter, and if that creature would be destroyed by an effect or would be dealt damage by anything, instead we remove the shield counter and that damage or destruction effect just doesn't happen. Now if the creature is dealt, a huge amount of damage from multiple sources, that's all still being dealt damage all at one event, so it all doesn't happen. It just removes the shield counter. But if that creature is dealt damage by like a double striker, they're dealt damage the first time by first strike damage, the shield counter goes away, and then regular damage will still be dealt to them since the shield counter is gone. So the Brotherhood Outcast, oftentimes we're going to, in this deck, use the shield counter mode and just have a nice 3/2 hanging around, but you never know. Someone might remove our Jite or our Pip-Boy, and we might want to get it back. Next is Duelist's Heritage. For 2 and a white, we have an enchantment that says whenever 1 or more creatures attack, you may have target attacking creature gain double strike until end of turn. Obviously, this is great in our deck because it lets us attack with Jin Sakai and simply choose the double strike mode, or rather the unblockable mode. Since Duelist Heritage will trigger at the same time as that attack, and we can choose Jin Sakai to gain double strike from Duelist Heritage. So now we're getting the best of both worlds. However, Duelist Heritage does not say whenever one or more creatures you control attack. So this is going to happen every time any creatures attack. We are allowed to give one of those attacking creatures double strike. So this is something we can remind our opponents of and say, hey, by the way, Duelist Heritage will let me give your commander or one of your big creatures double strike as long as you don't attack me. I'm not going to choose to give it double strike if you attack me, but if you attack someone else and you leave me alone, I can give one of your creatures double strike. Oftentimes that's a pretty good deal people will go with. Next up is one of our Planeswalkers. This is Kaito Shizuki. For a generic, a blue, and a black, we had a legendary Planeswalker Kaito that comes in with 3 loyalty counters. And it says at the beginning of our end step, if Kaito entered this turn, he phases out. What that means is the turn we play Kaito, when we get to our end step, Kaito will phase out. We will treat him like he does not exist. He's not on the battlefield as far as the rules are concerned until the start of our next turn. When we untap, Kaito is phased in and we'll get him back. And this ability only functions that first time. But we can drop Kaito, do something with him, and not worry about him being targeted, at least for that first turn cycle, since he's come in. So his abilities are, for a +1 loyalty, we can draw a card, and then unless we attacked this turn, we discard a card. So looting is not terrible for us, but if we've attacked, which we likely will have, all we have to do is activate Kaito's +1 ability post-combat, and all we're doing is drawing a card. We don't have to discard since we attacked. Pretty good. We can -2 Kaito to make a 1/1 blue ninja creature token with this token can't be blocked. An excellent way for us to send creatures at our opponents. And, a 1/1 ninja with double strike isn't doing that much damage, but it's doing something for us. And -7, we get an emblem that says whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a blue or black creature card, put it on the battlefield, and then shuffle. So we're not running a whole lot of creatures in our deck. Honestly, don't need that many. But Kaito gives us the ability to go tutor one up if we are able to ultimate him. That's pretty alright. Even if we get Kaito out and all we ever do is draw a second card because we attacked each turn, that's pretty alright. Moment of Valor is next from Wilds of Eldraine. 2 and a white for an instant that says choose either untap target creature, it gets +1/+0 and gains indestructible until end of turn, or destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. So this is another sort of take off of things like Spectacular Tactics. For 3 mana, we get to decide either to make our commander or one of our other creatures indestructible and give it +1/+0 until end of turn, or we can blow something up with power 4 or greater. Pretty good either way. Monastery Siege is next. This is 2 and a blue for an enchantment, and as it enters, we choose Khans or Dragons. If we chose Khans, at the beginning of our draw step, we will draw an extra card and then discard a card. So it turns all of our draw steps into, instead of drawing 1, it's draw 2, discard 1. So that's good. Not really like card advantage because we're losing the extra card we're getting, but it does give us a way to have some card selection, and oftentimes that's good. Or we can choose Dragons, and then spells our opponent's cast that target us or a permanent we control cost 2 more to cast. This is not ward, it's not a triggered ability, it just increases the cost of anything that our opponents would cast targeting us or our permanents. Oftentimes in this deck, I imagine you want to choose Khans because the extra selection choices you get are just very powerful. But if you're looking to protect yourself, Dragons is not a bad choice. Retreat to Hagra is next. This is 2 and a black for an enchantment with landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, we choose to either give one of our creatures +1/+0 and death touch until end of turn, or for each opponent to lose a life and us to gain a life. This is mostly going to be the first choice. We want to be able to give our commander, who can have double strike, a bonus to his power. Because not only does that mean he's going to be able to do 2 more damage, 1 for the first strike and 1 for the regular damage, but it means that if our opponents do decide to block, they know their creature is going to die, because our commander has first strike and death touch. So unless their creature is indestructible or also has first strike, we're going to be able to do damage first, and that damage is going to kill their creature, thanks to death touch. So yeah. But there's nothing wrong with just draining our opponents if we don't need this. Split Up is another board wipe for us. This is 1 and double white for a sorcery from Duskborn that says choose destroy all tapped creatures or destroy all untapped creatures. Just depending on where we are in the turn and what it looks like that our opponents have in the battlefield, this is a great inexpensive board wipe for us. Trial of a Time Lord is next, obviously from Doctor Who. This is a saga. If you haven't seen sagas before, the way it works is when it enters and at the start of your pre-combat main phase, you put a lore counter on this, and then it triggers whichever ability is linked to the number of lore counters on it. And after that last ability resolves, you sacrifice the saga. So we get 4 effects over the course of 4 turns, starting the turn that we play it, and then after that 4th one, it goes away. So the first 3 effects, the turn we play it and the next 2 turns, are all the same. They are exile target non-token creature and opponent controls until this saga leaves the battlefield. So sort of like Oblivion Ring or Banishing Light. We'll take those creatures and tuck them under the saga. If we hit an opponent's commander, obviously they could put it back in the command zone, but if they replay it before we have finished doing these, we could just exile it again. It's a possibility. And then the 4th one is, starting with us, each player votes for innocent or guilty. If guilty gets more votes, the owner of each card exiled with the saga puts that card on the bottom of their library, which means all of those cards that we had exiled temporarily are gone forever. Now it seems like, why would guilty get more votes? Isn't everyone going to choose to vote for innocent so they can get their card back? It may be the case that if we've chosen well, the cards that have been exiled are either scary enough that the other players at the table are willing to lose their creature, if they had a creature under this, in order to not have our mutual opponent's cards come back, or maybe we've exiled creatures from all the same opponent, or just from 2 opponents. We're going to get that other opponent that we didn't exile things from, and they're probably going to vote, yeah, make those things gone forever. Bottom of the library is pretty good. And, of course, if a player gets their commander exiled by one of the first 3 chapter abilities of the saga, and then guilty gets more votes, their commander is going to go to the bottom of their library, but they can choose to instead put it in the command zone then, even though it was in exile, because it is changing zones again. So yeah, it doesn't mean commanders are gone forever with this, but it is a pretty good way to get rid of things, and if you are careful with your selections, it's pretty likely you're going to be able to get those things gone forever. Next up is Virtue's Maneuver. 2 and a black for a sorcery. This is Virtus's Maneuver, my mistake. 2 and a black for a sorcery that says for each player, choose friend or foe. That's us as well. We are also a player, not an opponent. Each friend returns a creature card from their graveyard to their hand, and each foe sacrifices a creature of their choice. So the simplest way for us to run this is, if we've got a creature card in our graveyard, even if it's our commander, we just cast Virtus's Maneuver, and we choose foe for everyone but ourselves. We get to put our commander back in our hand, or whatever creature we have in the graveyard, and everyone else has to sacrifice a creature. Maybe it's not the creature we want them to sacrifice, but this is 3 mana to kill 3 creatures probably, and bring 1 back into our hand. Pretty nice. Barren Step Siege is next from Tarkir Dragonstorm. 2, a white and a black for an enchantment that says, as it enters, choose Abzan or Mardu. If you choose Abzan, at the beginning of your end step, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. That's pretty great. And if you choose Mardu, at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under your control this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature of their choice. So Mardu is a little less powerful for our deck, because we don't want our creatures to die generally. We have several ways to make tokens, but we're hoping we don't have our tokens die, or our non-token creatures, of course. So just being able to put a counter on each of our creatures at our end step every turn is pretty alright. But I can see this playing out as the right choice sometimes, and so that's why we have these choices in the deck. Next is one of the original sieges, it's Citadel Siege. 2 and double white for an enchantment that says, as it enters, choose Khans or Dragons. If you choose Khans at the beginning of combat on your turn, put 2 1/1 counters on target creature you control. So as opposed to the Baron Step Siege, it's happening at the start of combat, and it's 2 counters instead of 1, but it's only 1 creature. That's pretty good for us. If we choose dragons at the beginning of combat on each opponent's turn, we tap target creature that player controls. So this is more powerful than it seems. Because it's the beginning of combat on each opponent's turn. We get to take each opponent at the start of their combat phase, before they get to attack, we get to tap down one of their creatures so they can't attack with it. That means they can't attack us, and they also can't attack other players. We don't have to agree with them on which creature they have to tap down, or that we're tapping down. So we can be political with our other opponents and say, which one would you like me to tap down? And if I tap that one down, I won't tap down your biggest thing, but you agree not to attack me, or something like that. So dragons can play out pretty politically, and also protect us in the process. However, Khans is very tempting because it makes our Jin Sakai much bigger. So yeah. Next up is Felidar Retreat. For 3 and a white, we have an enchantment with landfall. Whenever our land we control enters, we choose to either make a 2/2 white cat beast creature token, which is not a terrible choice. We can throw those at our other opponents to get the Jin Sakai trigger, making them either unblockable or making them 2/2s with double strike. That's not nothing. Or we can put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control, and all those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. This is much more enticing, but especially after we've already gotten some cat beasts out. Being able to do both of these is very powerful. Next we have Kamiz, Obscura Oculus. This card is so much fun. Kamiz is a 2/4 legendary octopus rogue, used to be a cephalid, miss you, for the same cost as our commander, 1 and Obscura mana, or Esper mana. Kamiz says, whenever you attack, target attacking creature can't be blocked this turn, and it connives. Conniving means we draw a card and then we discard a card, and if the card we discarded was not a land, we get to put a 1/1 counter on the creature that connived. So whenever we attack, one of our creatures is going to maybe get a counter on it and is going to become unblockable, and then we can choose another attacking creature with lesser power to gain double strike until end of turn. So Kamiz is sort of letting us pump up one of our creatures, and that creature and another creature are both getting the things that Jin Sakai wants to give them, unblockable or double strike, which means if we're attacking with 2 creatures and we target them appropriately so that the second creature has lesser power, using Jin Sakai and Kamiz's triggers, we can give them both unblockable and both double strike. Because let's say it's Kamiz attacking and Jin attacking. Jin attacks opponent A, Kamiz attacks opponent B. When they both trigger, let's say we resolve Kamiz's trigger first. We let Jin get the unblockable. Jin will connive. We discard a non-land. Jin now has a power of 3. We choose Kamiz as the second one. Kamiz now has double strike. And now the 2 Jin Sakai triggers resolve because we have 2 creatures each attacking by themselves a different opponent. So we choose for Kamiz to be unblockable and for Jin to get double strike. So now they both have double strike, they're both unblockable, and we connived with Jin, so he's a little bigger. So we're doing more commander damage with that. This is really great, just an excellent way of supplementing what our commander's already doing. Next, for more Obscura fun, it's the Obscura Confluence. 1, a white, a blue, and a black, so the same as cost as our commander, for an instant that lets us choose 3 of the following, and we can choose the same mode more than once. So if you're indecisive, just do the same thing over and over. We can either, until end of turn, target creature loses all abilities and has base power and toughness 1/1. Target creature connives, as we just discussed, or target player returns a creature card from their graveyard to their hand. So this Raise Dead is not terrible. Being able to make something that's already blocked into a 1/1, so it's probably going to die, pretty good. And the connive is pretty good too. Even if we were to choose this middle mode 3 times, drawing and discarding 3 times puts 3 of our cards in our graveyard, which might let us get something back. So maybe we want to do this twice, so we know we've got a creature in hand that we want to get back to our hand. And we're probably getting counters on our creatures in the process. Lots of flexibility here for only 4 mana. Phenomenon Investigators from Duskmourn Commander is next. 2, a blue and a black, for a 3/4 human detective that as it enters we choose to believe or doubt. If we choose believe, whenever a non-token creature we control dies, we make a 2/2 black horror enchantment creature token. So we get a 2/2, that's okay. Or we can doubt. And at the beginning of our end step, we can return a non-land permanent we control to our hand, and if we do, we draw a card. This is pretty sweet because it lets us bounce our things that aren't doing a lot for us in that moment. And it also is fed by this first ability. If we were able to get down, I guess there's not really a way in this deck to do both, but that's what choices are about. But if we were making, let's say, tokens from Felidar Retreat, these cat beasts, we could bounce those with our Phenomenon Investigators. So we're playing a land, getting a token. At the end step, we're bouncing that token and drawing a card. So it's turned into, slowly, play a land, draw a card. That's pretty good. But being able to bounce our other things, or our inexpensive things, like the Lost Jitte, just turning that into card draw, and we're sort of paying for it by having to recast that card next turn, that's not bad. Next we have C Double. 2 and double blue for an instant that can't be copied. It says choose one, and if an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, you may choose both instead. So pretty sweet if we're playing against someone with a graveyard strategy. Copy target spell, you can choose new targets for the copy, and a copy of a permanent spell becomes a token, or create a token that's a copy of target creature. So 2 different ways to make copies of creatures, or we can just copy a spell itself, and we can use this to copy a kill spell, or a counter spell even, and use our copy of the counter spell to target the original counter spell and protect our creatures, whatever we may need to do. C Double is very nice. Struggle for Project Purity, a little thematic for this deck. 3 and a blue for an enchantment that says, as it enters, choose Brotherhood or Enclave. If you choose Brotherhood at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent draws a card, and you draw a card for each card drawn this way. That's a pretty nice way to get everyone at the table to be kind of happy with you and sort of leave you alone at least for a little while. Even though you're drawing 3 cards during your upkeep and then 1 more in your draw step, everyone's drawing 1, so you're here to help. It's not a big deal. Or we could choose Enclave. Whenever a player attacks us with 1 or more creatures, that player gets twice that many rad counters, which means twice as many rad counters as they had creatures attack us. And that's during the attack phase. Now I know you're asking, what are rad counters? This is what a rad counter is. It's just a counter that goes on a player. It doesn't have an inherent meaning except this one. At the beginning of each player's pre-combat main phase, if they have any rad counters, they mill that many cards. And for each card that they milled that isn't a land, they lose a life and a rad counter. So these radiation counters go away eventually, but they're going to lose life in the process, and they're going to have cards milled in the process as well. So a pretty nice way, not only for us to drain our opponents a little bit and to sort of disincentivize them from attacking us, but also to get cards in their graveyard for C Double. Might be useful too. So yeah. Next from Bloomborough is Warren Warleader. 2 and double white for a 4/4 Rabbit Knight with Offspring 2. Offspring means when we cast the spell, we can pay an additional 2 generic mana, so it would be 4 and double white. And if we do, when the Warleader enters, we make a copy of it that is exactly the same except that it's a 1/1. So, the Warleader, and any copies of it we may have, say whenever we attack, not with the Warleader, just attack at all, we either make a 1/1 white rabbit creature token that's tapped and attacking, or all of our attacking creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn. This is usually more powerful for us since our commander often has double strike, but making little tokens, sometimes it's fine. And if we have this Offspring go on, we can get 2 tokens, +2/+2 for all of our attackers, or 1 of each, since both the Offspring and the original will trigger for us. Next is Will of the Abzan. 3 and a black for a sorcery that says choose one. If you control a commander as you cast this spell, you may choose both instead. The first option is any number of target opponents each sacrifice a creature with the greatest power among creatures that players controls, and they lose 3 life, so they have to sacrifice their strongest thing. Or we return target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. So this is just a straight up zombify if we need it to be, and we might be able to get this happening at the same time. Oftentimes, however, what we want to bring back is Jin Sakai, so sometimes this doesn't work for us in the sense of, if we're bringing back Jin Sakai, obviously he's not on the battlefield, so we can't do both. But yeah, it works for us multiple different ways. Next, from the recent Avatar set, this is Ember Island Production. 3 and double blue for a sorcery that says choose one. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it's not legendary, and it's a 4/4 hero in addition to its other types. Or create a token that's a copy of target creature an opponent controls, except it's not legendary, and it's a 2/2 coward in addition to its other types. So this is straight up propaganda. Whatever we have, we make another one of it, and it's a big, big hero. Or whatever our opponent has, we get it, and it's a 2/2 coward. That's all you get. So typically this in this deck is meant to make a copy of Jin Sakai, because the copy isn't legendary. So getting a second Jin Sakai with all the same abilities and being a 4/4 is pretty sweet for us. We use the original to attack opponent A and the copy to attack opponent B. They both trigger twice each because they both see a creature attacking a player by itself. So we can choose both modes for both creatures, since the original Jin Sakai can give itself double strike and the copy Jin Sakai can give the original unblockable, and then both do the opposite as well for the copy. That means we get in for a total of 8 damage from the copy and 4 damage from the original, assuming no pumps. That's all pretty sweet. It is worth mentioning that every time we make a copy of our commander, that copy is not doing commander damage. They're just doing creature damage. Our commander isn't a card named Jin Sakai, Ghost of Tsushima. Our commander is specifically the card we designated as our commander. It's not every creature that looks like him. So yeah, Ember Island players. Next is Kaya the Inexorable, and I use this art for it, not just because it's the most affordable, but because it's beautiful. Love Kaya. 3, a white and a black for a 5 loyalty legendary planeswalker, Kaya, that says, +1, put a ghost form counter on up to 1 target non-token creature. Ghost form counters don't have any specific inherent meaning, they're just used by this card. That creature gains when this creature dies or is put into exile, return it to its owner's hand, and create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. We can -3 Kaya to exile a non-land permanent, or we can -7 Kaya to get an emblem that says at the beginning of your upkeep you may cast a legendary spell from your hand, from your graveyard, or from cards you own in exile without paying its mana cost. That means at the start of our upkeep, wherever Jin Sakai has gone, we can cast him again if we need to. And that's true for all of our legendary spells, like Kaya itself. If we've been able to ultimate Kaya and that, kills her, then we can cast her without paying her mana cost again at the start of our next upkeep. Seems pretty good. And I really like that this puts a ghost form counter on the Ghost of Tsushima, making it so that we're able to avoid the commander tax, since when Jin is put into exile or dies, he'll come back to our hand, so we can just cast him for his mana cost again. And we get a little 1/1 spirit, which we're likely to be able to attack with the same turn that Jin comes down, because it's a flyer. And we can either make it unblockable or give it that little dose of double strike. So yeah, there's Kaya. Next is Tivit, Seller of Secrets, the alternate commander from the Kamiz precon that we just saw Kamiz earlier. Tivit is a 6/6 legendary Sphinx rogue for 3 and Esper, 3 a white, a blue, and a black. Tivit has Ward 3, Tivit flies, and Tivit says Council's Dilemma. Whenever Tivit enters or deals combat damage to a player, starting with us, each player votes for evidence or bribery. For each evidence vote, we investigate, meaning we make a clue, and for each bribery vote, we make a treasure. So we're going to get a number of tokens whenever Tivit enters or when Tivit deals combat damage to a player, equal to the number of players at the table, because it's a clue for every evidence vote and a treasure for every bribery vote. Except, while voting, we can vote an additional time. So we still have to vote first, but we make 2 votes. So we're getting, if we've got 3 opponents, we're going to get 5 tokens, and they might all be treasures if everyone chooses bribery. Other people might choose evidence because they expect us to dump our mana into clue tokens, but then they're just giving us card draw. It's pretty great. Next, we have another Will card. We've already seen Will of the Abzan. Now here's Will of the Teamer. 5 and a blue for a sorcery that says choose one. If you control a commander as you cast a spell, you may choose both instead. Create a token that's a copy of target permanent, except it's a 4/4 dragon creature with flying in addition to its other types. And Target player draws cards equal to the greatest mana value among permanents you control. So this dragon is a 4/4 flyer, but it does not say that isn't legendary. So if we were to make a copy of Jin Sakai with this, not only would we have to sacrifice one of them, since we have 2 legendary permanents in play with the same name, and we are not allowed to do that, we might have to choose to throw away Jin, or not, because we get a 4/4 flyer version of Jin, which is pretty powerful, but he's not doing commander damage, so we've got a choice there, which is kind of the point of the deck. So oftentimes, we are just drawing cards with this, but if we're doing both, it's worth recognizing that this 4/4 dragon is a copy of target permanent. That means we don't have to target our own stuff, and it also means we don't have to target creatures. We can make a copy of a land that's a 4/4 dragon if we feel like it. We can make a copy of the biggest, scariest enchantment in play. If someone has Omniscience or something, we can get a copy of that, except that it's also a 4/4 dragon. Or we can grab our opponent's biggest creature, and this effect will overwrite that biggest creature's power and toughness. It'll just be a 4/4, but it'll keep all of its other abilities. So yeah, very flexible, very interesting effect right here. And even if we don't get the chance to use both of these, using the second one and drawing a bunch of cards, that's pretty great too. Our commander is 4 mana, so this is 6 mana for a 4 mana, or for a 4-card draw. That's not bad. Finally, we have Hullbreaker Horror. 5 and double blue for a 7/8 Kraken Horror with flash that can't be countered. And it says whenever you cast a spell, that's any spell at all, except for Hullbreaker Horror itself. This has got to be resolved and in play, of course. We choose to either return target spell we don't control to its owner's hand, or return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So this means a spell on the stack. If someone casts a spell and we can respond with an instance of our own, Hullbreaker Horror will trigger and we can bounce that spell that our opponent cast back to its owner's hand. Or, anytime we cast any spells, we can bounce a non-land permanent, either one that we own or that someone else owns, to its owner's hand. So play a bunch of spells with the Hullbreaker Horror out and clear the board of everything that's scary or expensive so that we're able to get in unblocked, since all of our opponent's blockers have been bounced maybe, so that we're able to slow our opponents down. Hullbreaker Horror, very nice, repeatable removal for us. So that covers our choices section. We're going to look at a couple more sections in our game plan, starting with the section I'm calling Voltron. These are cards, we've already seen one of these, but these are cards that help us with our attacking with our commander, which we have other ways of Voltroning up our commander, but these are the ones that I want to focus on here. We've already seen Duelist Heritage, giving a bunch of creatures, but specifically, we want to hit Jin Sakai with it so that Jin can give himself unblockable, and we get unblockable and double strike. So Duelist Heritage is nice for that. We also have Helm of the Host. This is an expensive effect, and it's also $7.50. 4 generic mana for a legendary equipment. So since it's legendary, we could cast this using that emblem from Kaya. Worth thinking about. But it costs 4 and it equips for 5, so that's a lot of mana. But it says at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of equipped creature, except the token isn't legendary and that token gains haste. So this is a great way for us to pump out more Jin Sakais if we want to. Just put the helm on Jin Sakai, go to combat, make an extra Jin Sakai, it has haste, both of them attack, both of them help each other, they both have unblockable and double strike. Sounds pretty good. We also have Arna Kinnarood, Sky Captain. 2, a white, a blue, and a red, and a black rather, so 2 an Esper, for a 4/4 legendary human knight with flying and lifelink, and ward, discard a card. Meaning, if our opponents want to target Arna with a spell or ability, they have to discard a card or their spell or ability gets countered. And Arna says, whenever a modified creature you control, modified means a creature that is equipped, a creature that has counters on it of any sort, or a creature that has auras on it that we control. As long as it has something attached to it, and if it's an aura that we control it, or it has any counters on it, it is modified. So Arna says whenever a modified creature you control attacks, double the number of each kind of counter on it. And then for each non-token permanent attached to it, that is to say, auras and equipment, create a token that's a copy of that permanent attached to that creature. So Arna lets us, every time any of our creatures that happen to be modified attack, we double all their counters, and we double all their auras, and we double all their equipment. So Arna gives us a lot of cool stuff. And for things like equipment, we can then move those equipment to other things if we want to. Put them on Arna, maybe. Seems good. So that covers our few Voltron options. We have a few Evasion options as well. I put this in its own section because I want to be able to have ways to attack so that we can choose with Jin Sakai to give him double strike. We want to be able to do double damage with double strike. We don't want to have to worry about being blocked in the process, so here are ways for us to get around being blocked. We've already seen the Lost Chite and how it can make one of the creatures, any creature I guess, but particularly one of our opponent's creatures, unable to block this turn. Sword Coast Sailor is one of the two backgrounds we have in this deck. A background is a legendary enchantment. This one's for 1 and a blue, and it gives Jin Sakai an ability. Commander creatures we own have, whenever this creature attacks a player, if no opponent has more life than that player, this creature can't be blocked this turn. That means if Jin Sakai attacks a player, attacks an opponent that either has the most life among our opponents or is tied for the most life among our opponents. It doesn't matter if we have more life than the player that Jin Sakai is attacking. All that matters is that no other opponent has more life. They can have the same amount. And if that's the case, then Jin Sakai can't be blocked this turn. Pretty good. Next we have Waterbender Ascension. This card is really cool, from Avatar recently. 1 and a blue for an enchantment that says, whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, put a quest counter on this enchantment, and then if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, draw a card. This is all one trigger, which means if Jin Sakai does damage to a player with double strike, Jin Sakai is going to do damage twice, so this whole thing is going to trigger twice. Once for the first strike damage, and one for the regular damage. Meaning it will put a quest counter on it, and then it will put another quest counter on it. And if either of those times Jin does damage to that opponent, if either of those times happens to be the time that puts the 4th counter on this, or a later one, we also draw a card. So this may mean, and hopefully will mean, eventually, whenever Jin hits at a player, we're drawing 2 cards off of it. Once for the first strike damage, once for the regular strike damage. Waterbender Ascension also says, if we Waterbend 4, target creature can't be blocked this turn. Waterbend means we have to pay 4 generic mana, but we can also tap artifacts or creatures, and each one pays for 1 of those generic mana. So we have ways that we can give ourselves a little bit more evasiveness, a little bit more unblockability for our commander. For example, we could tap Lost Chite, because it is an artifact. None of its abilities require it to tap, but we can use Waterbender Ascension's Waterbend ability to tap it. So we've lost no efficacy from Lost Chite, and it's helped us make Jin Sakai unblockable. Pretty good. Next we have Steel of the Godhead. This is a really cool aura for 2 and a hybrid Azorius mana, so we can either cast this for 2 and a white or 2 and a blue. It's an aura that enchants a creature, and it says, as long as an enchanted creature is white, it gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. And as long as an enchanted creature is blue, it gets +1/+1 and can't be blocked. Jin Sakai is white and blue and black. So this will give Jin Sakai +2/+2, lifelink, and unblockable. Meaning whenever we attack with him, as long as we're getting his trigger, because we're attacking a player with only him, we won't have to choose to give him unblockable. We can simply choose to give him double strike, and he will have double strike and lifelink and +2/+2. So we're going to be able to gain 8 life off of that and do 8 damage with him, hopefully. Pretty good. We've seen Citadel Siege and how it lets us tap creatures that our opponents control, but that's actually on their turn, so it doesn't actually give us real evasion, except that this is happening during their turns, and their creatures aren't going to untap until their next turn. So as long as we're strategic about this, we can tap down their creatures, and it's not just that those creatures aren't able to attack during their combat, it's that they won't be able to block on our turn next, before they untap again on that player's turn. So a little bit of a roundabout way to get evasion, but it is there. Finally, we have Kamiz, and of course, Kamiz lets us make one of our creatures unblockable when we attack. Pretty good. So that covers our evasion section and most of the big sections that go into our game plan. I have more things to talk about that are cards that supplement our game plan, but before we get to those, I want to talk about these cards that support our game plan. Starting with our card advantage section, which as usual, I've just shorthanded here with a tag that says draw. It doesn't mean that all these cards actually draw us a card, it's just shorthand. So we've got combat research first. This is an aura that enchants a creature for a single blue and gives the enchanted creature, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So like we said before with Waterbender Ascension, if this is on Jean Sakai, Jean is going to be doing damage to a player with double strike, so that's 2 instances of damage, so that's 2 card draws. And as long as enchanted creature is legendary, it gets +1/+1 and has ward 1. So this protects Jean a little bit and makes him bigger. Pretty nice. All for 1 mana. We've seen the Pip-Boy. Pip-Boy lets us draw and then discard. Again, it's not really card advantage, but we do have a few ways to get cards out of our graveyard, so that's more of a recursive thing than a draw thing, but yeah, selection is helpful to us. Baleful Strix is next. We're in a blue and black deck, so we should run this card. It's so great. It's a 1/1 artifact creature bird for a blue and a black. It has flying, it has death touch, and when it enters, we draw a card. Hard to say no to a 2-mana card draw spell that leaves behind a 1/1 flying death toucher. Love it. Mind Stone technically can draw us a card. This is a mana rock. It's a 2-mana artifact that taps for colorless, but we can also pay 1, tap, and sack it to draw a card. We probably aren't going to do this early in the game, but later on, once we've got plenty of lands in play and we don't need the Mind Stone mana anymore, fine for us to sack it and see what we can pull out to replace it. Waterbender Ascension, of course, draws us cards because it gives all of our creatures the ability to do combat damage and draw us a card once it has 4 quest counters on it. Pretty good. Kaito lets us draw a card, and then we have to discard if we didn't attack this turn, so we just attack, or we just activate him post-combat, so pretty good. Monastery Siege lets us draw an extra card during our draw step, but then we have to discard. So again, not strictly card advantage, but that selection can really help us, that virtual card advantage that comes from it. Next, we have Grima, Saruman's Footman. 2, a blue and a black for a 1/4 legendary human advisor that inherently can't be blocked. Grima says, whenever Grima deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery. We may cast that card without paying its mana cost, and then that player puts the exiled cards that weren't cast this way on the bottom of their library in a random order. Meaning whichever one we do cast, if we cast it, is going to go to that player's graveyard, and if we don't cast it, it stays in exile. Or it doesn't stay in exile, it goes to the bottom. So Grima doesn't let us draw one of our cards, but does give us access every time it deals damage to one of our opponent's cards. And that might be a great card advantage spell of its own. It might be Swords to Plowshares. It could be any number of good things, and we get to choose which player it's going to be based on what we know about their decks. And not that hard to do. It's only 1 damage, so we can say, yeah, you're losing a card, but you might not have seen that card anyway. We're not using it on you, so do you mind if I attack you with Grima again? It's possible. Next up, we've seen Phenomenon Investigators. It lets us bounce one of our things during the end step, and if we do, we draw a card. Struggle for Project Purity lets us, at the beginning of our upkeep, allow each opponent to draw a card, and we get to draw a card for each card drawn that way. Pretty good. Tivit lets us create clue tokens, which it's not fast, but it is repeatable card advantage. And Will of the Teamer lets us draw a bunch of cards based on the mana value among permanents we control if we choose its second mode. So there we go. That covers our card advantage section. Let's talk about acceleration, which again, I've just sort of shorthanded as ramp. We've seen the Jite and the Pip-Boy. Both of them let us untap lands if we wish to use their triggers for that or use their activated abilities. Of course, we are running Sol Ring. Sol Ring is 1 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless mana. That's great. It's 1 for 2, or 2 for 1 if you want to think of it that way. Either way you look at this, it's extremely powerful. Put it in your deck. We're running Wayfarer's Bauble because we really want to make sure that we can get our colors. We're in 3 different colors. So for 1 mana, we get an artifact that if we pay 2, tap, and sacrifice it, we can search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. This is Rampant Growth. Rampant Growth normally costs 1 and a green, so we are paying 1 more mana for it, but we can do it over the course of multiple turns. So pretty nice as an effect for us for getting one of our lands into play and fixing our mana. Arcane Signet is also very powerful. It's a 2 mana rock, taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So we pay 2, this comes in untapped, and it taps for white, blue, or black. Pretty good. Felwar Stone, almost the opposite of that, is 2 generic mana for an untapped artifact that adds 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. Meaning, if our opponents are only playing red and green, then yes, Felwar Stone only makes red or green, so we can only use it on generic mana costs. But if it even makes 1 color that's in our commander's color identity, that's pretty good. It's an untapped rock that, again, we can use it on generic mana costs or on, blue or black, whatever it may make. But if it comes in and it can make 2 colors that are in our commander's color identity, let alone 3, pretty powerful. We've seen Mind Stone. It's a 2 mana untapped rock that just taps for colorless, but we can, later on, sack it to draw a card. Not terrible. Since we've got a little bit of a Voltron strategy here, we've got Sword of the Animist. This is a legendary equipment for 2 generic mana that equips for 2 generic mana. It gives the equipped creature +1/+1, and whenever that creature attacks, we can Rampant Growth. We search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So a great way for us to get more mana to pump up Jean Sakai, especially if Jean is getting to attack unblockably already, so he gets double strike, so he's doing 6 commander damage to someone, and we're getting a land into play in the process. Next, we're running all 3 talismans that are in our colors: Dominance, Hierarchy, and Progress. We'll talk about Dominance as the example. The talismans are 2 generic mana artifacts that all tap for colorless mana, or they tap for 1 or another color, for 2 different colors of mana, if we are willing to let them do a damage to us. So the Dominance talisman does blue and black, Hierarchy does white and black, and Progress does white and blue. The reason these are so good is because these are 2 mana untapped mana sources. We can only tap them for colorless if we're not willing to take the damage, but oftentimes we're going to just do that, and we're not going to need the colored mana because our mana base is pretty good. But if there's a time when we do need to accelerate ourselves with colored mana, that means it's worth spending a single point of life to do so. And even if we've done that, 5 or 6 times over the course of the game, that means our mana was exactly what we needed it to be every time, and we're so far ahead because of that, it doesn't matter that we're behind a little bit on life for what we otherwise might have been. So the talismans are excellent, and we're running all 3 of them. Kaya, of course, can accelerate us in the form of... It's not like Ramp, but Kaya's Emblem lets us cast things for free, which is to say we're not paying for them, so we're getting a pretty good mana discount, so in a way that's acceleration. And then Tivit, of course, makes treasure tokens for us for each bribery vote. At the very least, we're going to get 2 of them, because if we want them, we vote for them twice. Seems good. That covers our acceleration section. Let's talk about interaction, which again I've just shorthand tagged as removal. So we've seen Requisition Raid, which lets us destroy artifacts and enchantments, and we've seen Spectacular Tactics, which lets us destroy creatures with power 4 or greater. Let's talk about Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares. These cards are both very similar. They both cost 1 white mana. They're both instants. They both exile a creature, and they both give that creature's controller a little kickback. Swords to Plowshares gives that creature's controller life equal to the creature's power, and Path to Exile lets that creature's controller Rampant Growth. They search their library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Obviously, Swords to Plowshares is much more powerful, but both are excellent, and both go well in this deck. We've seen Tyrant Scorn. It lets us either bounce a creature, maybe even ours, or destroy a creature if that creature's mana value is 3 or less. Moment of Valor lets us destroy a creature with power 4 or greater. Trial of a Time Lord lets us spend 3 turns exiling creatures, and then maybe, depending on how the voting goes, put those creatures on the bottom of their owner's libraries, or at least one of those creatures. Well, no, it'll be all those creatures, I guess. Also, worth noting, this has voting on it. Tivit gives us an extra vote every time we vote. So that will still apply for voting for Trial of a Time Lord. Vertices Maneuver lets us force our opponents to sacrifice creatures if we would like. Voidrend, another Streets of New Capenna Obscura card, is an instant for Esper mana, a white, a blue, and a black, that says this spell can't be countered, destroy target non-land permanent. Just blow something up. Yeah, nothing much more to say about that. Just very good, efficient removal spell. Baron Step Siege, of course, lets us choose Mardu and force our opponents to sacrifice creatures if our creatures died. It's not targeted removal, but it's something. Obscura Confluence lets us, kind of in a roundabout way, remove things, because the only reason we're going to choose this mode, where a target creature loses all abilities and has base power and toughness 1/1, is if doing so would kill that creature. If we're being blocked, for example, with having our commander blocked, for example, or if someone is doing like a Pyroclasm, where every creature takes 2 damage, we can then make some of those creatures base power and toughness 1/1 and have them lose all of their abilities, which means they will die to the damage already marked on them. So Obscura Confluence can't kill things on its own, but just as a matter of course in a game of Commander, can certainly cause things to die. Will of the Abzan, of course, lets us force our opponents to sacrifice their creatures with the greatest power and also lose 3 life. Kaya, with her -3 ability, can exile non-land permanents, and Hullbreaker Horror can bounce basically anything, including spells. All right, that covers our removal spells, our interactions. We've seen both of our Wraths already, but let's make sure we take a look at them. Final Showdown lets us destroy all creatures for at least 3 and triple white, but we can also protect one of our creatures from it and make sure that everything dies in the process as well. And Split Up, for just 3 mana, lets us blow up all tapped creatures or all untapped creatures. Choice is yours. So, that covers our Wraths and therefore our support sections. Let's go over our supplemental sections, starting with, if I can type it, Pump. We've got a lot of cards in this section, but we've seen a lot of them as well. So these are cards that pump up our creatures, particularly our commander. Combat Research gives +1/+1 and Ward 1 to our commander. That's a good pump. Dragonfire Blade is 1 generic mana for an artifact that equips for 4, except the equipped ability costs 1 generic less for each color of the creature it targets. Since we have several creatures, including our commander, that are 3 colors, this equips for just 1 to those creatures. So it costs 1, equips for 1, it gives +2/+2, and hexproof from monocolored. Meaning, if an opponent tries to target the equipped creature with a spell that is only 1 color, they can't. It has hexproof from that spell or an ability of a monocolored source. But if they cast something like Voidrend, or something like Tyrant Scorn, or even something that is from a colorless source, then yes, Dragonfire Blade won't protect them. But we did only spend 1 and 1 to get it on them and give them +2/+2. So pretty powerful for what it is. Edge of the Divinity is next. This costs hybrid Orzhov mana, so either a white or a black. It's an aura that enchants a creature and says as long as the enchanted creature is white, it gets +1/+2. As long as it's black, it gets +2/+1. So this is Holy Strength and Unholy Strength together. And if we put it on our commander, both apply because our commander is white and black. So it's a 1 mana spell that gives a continual +3/+3. Pretty good. We see the Jite, lets us put counters on the equipped creature, so does the Pip-Boy. Requisition Raid lets us put a counter on each of our creatures. All That Glitters is 1 and a white for an aura that enchants a creature and gives the enchanted creature +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment we control, including itself. We are running 16 artifacts and 19 enchantments. That's 35 cards, including All That Glitters, that are going to give +1/+1 to the enchanted creature. Lots of cards, lots of ways to pump it up. Just really useful. We've seen Noble Heritage. No, we haven't. Noble Heritage is our other background. It's a 1 and a white legendary enchantment that says commander creatures you own have this ability. It's when this creature enters, and at the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature they control. Doesn't have to be our commander, but it's every player gets to do this. And for each opponent who does, we gain protection from that player until our next turn. Meaning they can't target us with anything they control, they can't damage us with anything they control, And they can't attach anything to us. They can't enchant us with like an aura that says enchant player. So like a curse or something. So the idea behind this is if we get this out before Jin Sakai comes in, then Jin Sakai will enter and this whole thing will happen. Everyone will get a chance to put 2 counters on one of their creatures. We will put it on Jin Sakai. And then each opponent who chooses to, although they don't have to choose to, will have protection from them until our next turn. And then at the start of our next turn, it will be the beginning of our upkeep, and this will trigger again. Eventually, our opponents will probably keep putting their counters on things and just going after other players, which protects us. But it also makes Jin Sakai bigger and bigger because we're going to get to do it as well. Very nice. We don't have to put these counters on Jin Sakai, of course, but we're probably going to. Next, we've seen Spectacular Tactics. Lets us destroy a creature power 4 or greater, but also put a counter on one of our creatures, probably our commander, and give them hexproof until end of turn. Sword of the Animist gives the equipped creature +1/+1. Moment of Valor gives them +1/+0 and indestructible. Nettle Cyst is 3 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 2 and gives the equipped creature +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment we control. So it's all that glitters, but on an equipment that we can continually equip to other things if we need to. However, Nettle Cyst also has Living Weapon. Living Weapon means when this enters, we make a 0/0 black Phyrexian Germ creature token, and then we attach Nettle Cyst to it. So essentially, Nettle Cyst comes in, and it's giving a bonus to a 0/0 creature, which would die if not for that bonus. Meaning, when we equip Nettle Cyst to something else, like Jin Sakai, it will kill the Germ, assuming we haven't equipped something else to the Germ or put a counter on it. But that's alright. It comes in, and it's essentially an equipment that is a creature for us for a little while. And if it dies, if the Germ dies when we move the Nettle Cyst to something else like our commander, that's okay, it's done its job. Next we have the leader of the Obscura. It's a Rafine Scheming Seer. A white, a blue, and a black for a 1/4 legendary Sphinx Demon with flying and ward 1. Rafine says whenever you attack, target creature connives X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. So that means as opposed to connive on its own, instead of conniving, meaning we draw 1 card and discard 1 card, we will draw a number of cards equal to the number of attacking creatures, and then discard that same number of cards. And for each card that we discarded that was not a land, we put a 1/1 counter on the creature that connived. So Rafine might be doing this herself. That's fine too. But if we attack with Jin Sakai out and Rafine out, we can attack with Rafine in the air and Jin Sakai on the ground. Jin Sakai maybe gives himself unblockable and Rafine double strike, but Rafine gives Jin Sakai the ability to connive 2, since it's 2 creatures attacking. Maybe we put 2 counters on Jin Sakai in the process, and he gets in unblockably with that. So 2 extra counters is sort of like him having double strike when his power started at 2, because he's got unblockable and he's doing 4 damage. So it's still 4 commander damage. And Rafine is getting to do double damage in the air, and maybe Rafine's power is only 1, or maybe Rafine has already attacked a couple of times and has connived her way up to being much stronger. Nice. We've seen Retreat from Hagra. Lets us make one of our creatures +1/+0 and gain Death Touch until end of turn if we have a land interplay. Steel of the Godhead, of course, gives +1/+1 if it's blue or if it's white, and +2/+2 if the enchanted creature's both. Barren Step Siege lets us put 1/1 counters on each of our creatures during our end step. Citadel Siege lets us put 2 1/1 counters on one of our creatures at the start of combat, if we've chosen cons, of course. Felidar Retreat lets us put a counter on each of our creatures if we choose the second mode, and they gain Vigilance until end of turn, whenever land comes in. Kamiz lets us have a creature connive after we've already made it unblockable. So, as we've seen before with Rafine and with Obscura, Confluence, and Kamiz, connive doesn't guarantee something's going to get bigger because we might have to discard a land. Or we might choose to discard a land, I should say. But otherwise, it's going to get bigger thanks to conniving. Obscura Confluence, I just mentioned, it can let something connive. And War and War Leader gives a temporary +1/+1 to all of our attacking creatures when we attack, as does its Offspring token. So that covers all of our pump spells. We have some spells that are protective as well, in lots of different ways. Combat Research, of course, gives Ward 1 to the legendary creature it's enchanted to, if we enchanted a legendary creature with it. Dragonfire Blade makes that creature, the equipped creature, hexproof or monocolored. Final Showdown can make one of our creatures indestructible, and if we only want to pay a white and 1, that's all it does. Pretty good. Kaya's Ghost form is next. This is not just here for the ghostiness, and Kaya, it just works for our deck too. For a single black, we get an aura that enchants a creature or planeswalker we control, so we can put this on Kaya herself. And it says when the enchanted permanent dies or is put into exile, return it to the battlefield under your control. It doesn't even come in tapped, the way that a lot of feign death or fake your own death type effects do. So thanks, War of the Spark, for something pretty sweet. Noble Heritage protects us if an opponent puts counters on one of their creatures. We've got protection from that opponent until our next turn. Spectacular Tactics can give one of our creatures a counter and hexproof. Swiftfoot Boots, really great for Jin Sakai, costs 2 and equips for 1. It is an equipment that gives the equipped creature hexproof and haste. Haste is really great if we're trying to win with commander damage. Hexproof is protective. There we go. Love the Swifties. Brotherhood Outcast, of course, can put a shield counter on one of our creatures. Ghostly Prison, we're still doing the ghost thing, is 2 and a white for an enchantment that says creatures can't attack us unless their controller pays 2 generic mana for each creature they control that's attacking us. Meaning, if an opponent wants to attack us with 3 creatures, they've got to pay 2 for each one of those creatures, so a total of 6 if they want to attack with all of them. Ghostly Prison definitely slows things down and forces someone to really say, yeah, I guess I'll pay for it. So pretty nice for us as a way to try and win the game with just one creature that is vulnerable on their own unless we're protecting it with all these other spells. While our opponents are going a little wider, Ghostly Prison forces them to go less wide, at least against us. We can say, you don't have to pay any mana to attack as long as you're willing to attack someone besides us. Sometimes that's enough to convince them. You never know. Moment of Valor can let us untap one of our creatures, give it a power bonus, and make it indestructible until end of turn. Monastery Siege makes it so spells our opponents cast that target us or a permanent we control cost 2 more if we choose dragons. Shielded by Faith is an aura for 1 and double white that enchants a creature and gives that creature indestructible. And whenever a creature enters, you may attach this aura to that creature. So pretty nice as a way to put it on something other than Jin Sakai. And then when Jin Sakai enters, we can just move this to him. And now he's indestructible. Pretty fun. Or if Jin Sakai gets exiled, say, well, Shielded by Faith is enchanting him, as long as we've got another creature, we can move it. I guess we can't move it right away because that creature has to enter, but yeah. If we had a creature we could flash in, like say our Hullbreaker Horror, that would be pretty nice. Put Shielded by Faith on the Hullbreaker Horror, let them exile Jin Sakai, we will just recast him from the command zone, and when he enters, we put the Shielded by Faith back on him. Yeah. Struggle for Project Purity, of course, makes it so that our opponents may not want to have to mill. They might not want those rad counters and, the little bit of loss of life that comes with them. So it's a very small disincentive to attack us, but it's there. And Kaya, of course, makes it so that our creatures will go back to our hand, and we make a little token once those creatures die if they have ghost form counters on them. And we can also recast things with her emblem, which is not really protective, but it means we don't have to worry about digging them out of the graveyard and what have you. But what if we want to dig them out of the graveyard? We have a recursion section. Just a few cards. Brotherhood Outcast can get us back an aura or equipment from our graveyard, as long as it's got mana value 3 or less. Vertus's Maneuver can get us a creature back from our graveyard to our hand. Obscure Confluence can do the same thing. And Will of the Abzan can get a creature back from our graveyard straight to the battlefield. Pretty nice. Our final section of spells is spells that make tokens. Since we're running so few creatures, we want to make sure that we have ways to block and otherwise attack and get more Jin Sakai triggers. So, Kaido can -2 and make us an unblockable 1/1 ninja. Felidar Retreat can give us a landfall trigger and make us a 2/2 cat beast. Helm of the Host can make copies of whatever it's equipped to at the start of combat, and those copies aren't legendary. So this is one of our several cards that makes more Jin Sakais. Phenomenon Investigators, if we choose Believe, will make us 2/2 horrors whenever our creatures die. C double, we can make a copy of a creature or of a spell, which might be a creature spell. Warren Warleader does make a token copy of itself in the form of Offspring, but also it and that Offspring token will make a 1/1 tapped and attacking rabbit if we choose for it to whenever we attack. Ember Island Production lets us make a token copy of one of our creatures that is also a 4/4 hero and isn't legendary, or one of our opponent's creatures, which is a non-legendary 2/2 coward in addition to its other types. Kaya, as part of her 1/1 or +1 ability rather, when the creature with the ghost form counter dies, we get a 1/1 flying spirit. We've seen Will of the Teamer and how it can make a copy of any permanent, except that permanent is also a 4/4 dragon creature token with flying. And we have Imposter Syndrome from the Spider-Man set. It's the meme. For 4 and double blue, we get an enchantment that says whenever a non-token creature we control deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of it except it isn't legendary. Meaning, if this is out and we attack with Jin Sakai and he's not blocked and he has double strike, we're going to get an extra Jin Sakai from first strike damage and a second extra Jin Sakai from regular damage. So now we can attack with all our Jin Sakais to all of our opponents next turn, and they're all unblockable and they're all double striking because we're going to move their triggers around in that way. So Imposter Syndrome, very nice for all of our creatures, especially our evasive ones, or the ones we make evasive with Jin Sakai. So yeah, it's an expensive enchantment, but it's worth it to us. So that covers all of our spells. We're going to look, as we always do, at our land base. We're running 17 basics. And while 4 islands, 4 swamps, and 9 plains seems like a weird mix, especially considering we're 45% white, 37% blue, 31% black, shouldn't it be mostly plains, then some islands, then fewer swamps? Well, as it turns out, our dual lands make up for an awful lot of our blue. We've got a lot of blue in our dual lands, so this actually gives us the most even split for the spells we're actually casting in this deck. Based on the math. The balance works. So there we go. We're running 2 bicycle lands. Bicycle lands, fetid pools and irrigated farmland, work like this. They are typed dual lands, which means the fetid pools is an island and is a swamp, which means it inherently taps for blue or black. It comes in untapped, but it's a tapped land and it counts as an island or a swamp and it makes our colors. So a tap land for those 2 colors is not bad. We can also cycle it for 2, meaning while it's in our hand, if we pay 2 generic mana and discard it, we can draw a card instead. So nice if we draw it late game and we don't need more lands. Fetid Pools taps for black and blue because it's a swamp and an island. Irrigated Farmland is just the same card except it's a plains and an island, so it taps for white or blue. We're running all 3 of our check lands, Drowned Catacomb, Glacial Fortress, and Isolated Chapel. The way these work is they are an untapped dual land, taps for white or black for the Isolated Chapel, which comes in tapped unless we control a plains or a swamp, so the same as the colors it makes. That doesn't necessarily mean a basic plains or swamp, because Irrigated Farmland is also a plains, and Fetid Pools is also a swamp. So that is 13 cards here, 14, 15, and we have some other typed duels as well, for a total of 17 cards for just those. It's a different mix for all of these, but they all work similarly. Glacial Fortress cares about plains and islands. Drowned Catacomb cares about islands and swamps. You get it. Check lands I really enjoy playing. In the decks that I build, with the amount of basics and typed duels that I run, they usually come in untapped, but you could upgrade these to slow lands, and they're somewhat more likely at least, to come in untapped versus tapped with the slow lands. Slow lands like Deserted Beach, for example. Which are lands that come in untapped if you control 2 more lands or more. 2 if it's basically the 3rd land or later that you play. Yeah. So we've got 5 lands in this fixing category. Obviously we're running Command Tower. It's an untapped land that adds 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, just the same way that Arcane Signet does, if you want to think of it that way. So this is an untapped tri-land. It taps for white, blue, or black for us. So we've got to run that. We're also running Exotic Orchard, which if Command Tower is like Arcane Signet, Exotic Orchard is like Fellwar Stone. It's an untapped land that makes mana based on the colors that our opponent's lands could produce. So at the very least, it's an untapped land that taps for mana we can spend on generic costs. But probably it's going to be an untapped dual land at least. We're running Path of Ancestry as well, which is a tap land with the same text as Command Tower. It makes white, blue, or black for us, even though it's tapped. So a tapped tri-land is not bad, especially because if we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. Now we're running 4 other humans besides our commander, but our commander shares shares creature types with itself. So Path of Ancestry, if we use it to cast Jin Sakai, will give us that scry. And we're probably going to get a few more scries throughout the game as well. We're running Myriad Landscape, which is a tap land that taps for colorless. Or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type. So in this deck, either 2 basic plains, 2 basic islands, or 2 basic swamps. We get to put those on the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. So even though they come in tapped, we have to pay to search for it, and Myriad Landscape comes in tapped. We did play it for 1 land drop, and we eventually had 2 lands in play, so it's very slow ramp, and it fixes our mana because we can find 2 copies of a basic that is the color we need most at that time. So worth playing, even if we wish things would go a little quicker. Similarly is Temple of the False God. I know not everyone loves this card, but this is a untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana. It's a soul land. It just doesn't activate at all unless we control at least 4 other lands, so 5 or more lands including it. So it is 1 land making 2 mana, and that is ramp for us. It's just not going to work for us early game, and we don't only need acceleration early game. We need mana, and as much as we can get, the whole game. So even though this isn't great early on, if we have an opening hand with Temple of the False God and 1 basic and no other lands, we probably don't want to keep that. But it's great when we can use it, and it's not unlikely for us to be able to use it, at least in the power level of decks that I build. We're running all 3 Pain lands. These are the same thing as the talismans we saw earlier. They come in untapped, tap for a colorless, or they tap for 1 of 2 colors if we're willing to let them do damage to us. For all the same reasons the talismans are good, these lands are great. Adakar Wastes makes white and blue, Caves of Koilos makes white and black, and Underground River makes blue and black. We're also running all 3 Scry lands. These are the temples. Temple of Deceit, Temple of Enlightenment, Temple of Silence. These are lands that come in tapped, and when they do, we just get a free Scry. So Path of Ancestry might give us more Scries over the course of the game, but it does rely on us using its mana to cast a creature that shares a type with our commander. Temple of Silence gives us the Scry just when we play it. So pretty good. Temple of Silence taps for 1 of 2 colors, of course, like all of these do. This is white and black. Enlightenment gives us white or blue, and Deceit gives us blue or black. If we wanted to upgrade these, we could upgrade to the Surveil lands if we wanted to. Something like Elegant Parlor. Elegant Parlor is white and red, so maybe not that one. But yeah, Shadowy Backstreet is the white-black one, so there's that. Much like if we wanted to upgrade these Pain lands, it would be fine to upgrade to the Shock lands, something like Hallowed Fountain or Godless Shrine, because those come in untapped if we pay 2 life when they do, but then that's the only time we need to pay the 2 life. And if we want them to come in tapped, that's also fine, and they'll only make colored mana as typed duels. And again, those Pain lands and those Surveil lands I mentioned are all typed the same way that our Bicycle lands are, so they make it so it's more likely for our check lands to come in untapped. We are running 2 Tango lands, Prairie Stream and Sunken Hollow. Much like the Bicycle lands, these are typed duels. But unlike the Bicycle lands, they don't come in tapped if we control 2 or more basic lands. So we've got lots of basics in our library. If we've got 2 in play, when this comes into play, it will come in untapped. Otherwise, it's a tapped duel, just like the Bicycle lands, and that's fine. And it counts toward our check lands. So we've got 21 lands in our deck that are basic typed for those check lands. Of course, Prairie Stream makes white and blue, and Sunken Hollow makes blue and black. We are running Arcane Sanctum. It's a tapped tri-land, that's all it is. Comes in tapped, makes 1 of each of our colors. Seems pretty good. And finally, we've got 2 utility lands. Demolition Field is my answer to problematic lands. I know it's only 1 card in the deck, but we're not trying to have the flexibility to blow up people's lands. It just doesn't land at people's tables very often. But you do want to have at least one way of dealing with something like a Glacial Chasm or a Rogue's Passage for someone running a deck similar to ours, something that will slow down someone else's plan or make it so our plan can work for us, like if someone was running Glacial Chasm, stopping us from doing that is something we want to stop them from doing. So Demolition Field comes in untapped, taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls. They then get to search for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped and shuffle, and so do we. So both players, our opponent and ourselves, get to go find a basic, put it in untapped, so neither of us is down a land. It's just our opponent is down whatever problematic land they had, and that's worth it. Finally, like I mentioned a moment ago, we're running Rogue's Passage. It's an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 4 and tap it and make a creature unblockable. This is one more source of evasion for Jin Sakai, so that we can use Rogue's Passage to give him unblockable, so we can give him double strike with his own trigger, and we can get in with a little bit more commander damage. We can use this on our other creatures too, and we can even use it on our opponent's creatures. Probably we don't want to do that when they're going to attack us, or when they're already attacking us, or when they're about to attack and we don't know if they're coming at us, but we can say, look, if opponent B, if you attack opponent C, I will make your creature unblockable with Rogue's Passage, just leave me alone the next turn and you get a free hit in. That's a good deal to make. They probably will make it. So yeah. And that covers it. Thanks for watching, everyone. I appreciate you sitting through this video for a type of card that I normally wouldn't build for. But I appreciate the request, Noah, and I had fun making this video. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's helpful to you. Let me know in the comments if there's anything, any further questions you have. And yeah, make sure to like and subscribe. Ring the bell if you want to see more of my videos, or to be notified when they come out. Check out my channel. I've got an awful lot of commander decks on there, and more are coming out every week. And I think that's about it. I guess I should just remind you that Magic is fun. You should play more Magic.